the 12 signs of astrology, and then you're going to have 9 planets that you need to look at, namely Sun, Moon, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Venus, Rahu, Ketu, and Saturn. You're going to have to look at those 9 planets and what signs they were in. We'll then correspondingly put them in certain houses in your chart, and that is your natal chart right there. That is your basic chart, natal meaning birth chart, from which everything then expands out of. All realizations come from that as the starting point.
You also talk about here about astrological certification. Supposing someone reads your books and becomes inspired. It's a very inspiring book. They're inspired. I'd like to know as much about this as I possibly can. Maybe even do it as a service. Perhaps you could walk us through what you would offer somebody who was interested in that way.
3 things will have taken place before that point. 1, my book will have been purchased and read by this person who's interested now. 2, I will have done the person's natal chart, because I would not in any circumstance have someone embark upon the path of astrology without doing the natal chart. And in analyzing the natal chart, I'm going to look at the occupational conjunctions and potencies and possibilities, potential. And I'm going to look also at whether key planets are strong in the chart that are important to have to become an astrologer. And if these things reach a critical mass, a threshold, a basic threshold, then if the person says, I want to become a core sidereal astrologer, then I'll say, yes, let's do it. But if they don't, then I'll say, no, this is not the way for you to go, but just keep in touch with me. When you need some help, I'll give it to you. But really, you shouldn't take this on as your profession.
Right. So if it looks good, then how would that progress?
Well, first of all, we've done the preliminary steps. So then I will have a curriculum, and my curriculum will basically involve a very detailed analysis by the student of his or her own chart. Much more detailed than the natal chart, which was already done. That'll be part of the process. Then also, I'm going to give various tests in regard to election astrology. I'm going to say a person wants to make a trip from such and such to such and such. He's been given a 10-day window in which to make this trip. Tell me which date, which time is best for making this trip. And then I will see how close they come, because I will analyze in great detail those 10 days, and I will see which is the best one. And I'll see whether they come up with a grade C level of a good one, or grade B level, a grade A level, or if they actually get not only the lugna I'm looking for on a certain day, but the point of the lugna, which may be 4, 5, 7 minutes. If they get all that, then they get the A+. So I'm going to give various, in other words, it's going to be a learning process, obviously. It's because it's instructional, it's tutorial. At the same time, there's going to be tests like that. Then there's going to be a final test, and as long as that's passed, then I'm going to give a certificate.
Very good. General question. There are obviously many people in America at the moment, well, all over the world, English-speaking world, practicing astrology. They all present themselves as authorities, and they all probably have fairly strong opinions about the authenticity of what they're doing. What advice can you give somebody who has some intuitive understanding and faith in astrology, but hasn't gone into it at depth, but wants to understand it more? How do you navigate all of this, what appears to be apparent differences of opinion as to what's valid and what isn't?
My advice is take a look at core sidereal astrology. Now, if you got a sort of an inquisitive mind that likes to roam around and likes to sample a lot of things, then include core sidereal astrology. Include it. And then see if you find that I remove a lot more contradictions than the other systems do and the other astrologers do.
Okay.
If you're looking for a psychic, that's really not what astrology is. Some just use astrology like others use a belt. They hold the belt and then get their visions, and some use the chart like that. That's psychic though. So, but astrology is a combination of Buddha yoga combined with knowing the laws, combined with intuition. So the three things are there. It's not a psychic process per se. So if you want to go to a psychic, you can do that. But if you want to learn the science and the laws and apply your intelligence, then astrology is for you. Sidereal astrology.
Can you give some examples of the election calculations? You seem pretty convinced about it. I think the average person might consider that, well, certainly the average American would consider that to be on the borderline superstition. Can you give some examples of how it's worked for you, or how it's worked for those that you've worked with?
Well, to some degree, I would have to reply to that question in terms of that you can't prove a negative.
Right.
In other words, if you do things that have inherently in them some risk, and all of a sudden those risks start playing out in a negative way, and you start saying, "What can I do?" Well, here's one of the things you can do: time your activities so that maybe if they're saying that by doing it when all the planets or most of the planets are good, and you got a mitigation planet, and maybe you got Jupiter in a quadrant, or you have a planet exalted in the ascendant, why don't you give that a try and then see if all of a sudden the endeavor becomes successful? Then maybe by doing it that way, you can say to yourself, perhaps there's something to it, because so many of the other times when I did something, some major obstacle came up, some obtuse negativity came up, some great danger came up, and I was lucky to get out alive. What to speak of succeeding? I didn't at all succeed at the endeavor. I was happy to just survive it. But, you know, we need to do more than that. So why not give election astrology a try so that you can see if you're successful to your expectation, that maybe the planets had something to do with it. And I've noticed that any time that I calculated a chart and had enough good placements in it and mitigation factors and benefits and benedictions in it, that I've never experienced on whatever the endeavor was any major setback. And if the chart had in it, you know, I've been doing hundreds of charts. There's only one time I did a chart where I could say that all 9 planets were good. So you're never going to get all of them good, and even Narada Muni says that. Try to get more good than not good. So that's the way you're going to have to do it almost all the time. But you get those exceptional times. That was in September of 1984, I believe it was a Sagittarius ascendant, but I'm not 100% certain, so long ago. But the fact is, I had every planet good in that chart. And I moved into an apartment with a person in Houston, did so minimal work, and made $11,000 in the space of a couple of 3 months. And doing minimal work, sometimes doing no work at all. So the fact is that I timed going into that apartment with him. And that's how it played out. So, but you're not going to get a chart like that too often. But you can get a chart that's very good. You can get a chart that's still outstanding, because you have to know those rules. But if you don't know those rules, then go to an astrologer, a sidereal astrologer who does know those rules, and then he'll do the chart for you. And then you then act on what he says, do it at this time, exactly this time, and then judge by the results.
Great. One of the chapters in your book is about chakras, is it not?
It's actually about centers.
What do you tell us about centers or chakras?
I do speak about chakras in that chapter.